We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Now, you may have noticed a new panellist at the table. No, it's not a holiday rota cock-up. As well as being founder of Cobra Beer, Lord Karan was apparently debating champion at Cambridge University twice. Well, we'll see about that.
Oh, wow.
On the show this week, Michelle thinks we need to start training paedophile vigilantes. Karan says he wants to talk about taking back control. Bring it on. Nick says the tech giants are skating on very thin ice, and June, as usual, is in La La Land. But first, it's me, and I'm talking about Boris. Not Boris the bumbler, not stab in the back Boris, not Boris the backseat driver, but Boris the Magnificent, who in a 4,000-word, fantastically upbeat essay delivered his gloriously positive vision of Brexit. It was only a few weeks ago the euphoria of the last summer's Brexit revolution looked like it was in ruins, quashed by the grey men in government and Whitehall. But thanks to Boris and his rip-roaring confidence in Britain, the dream is back on the cards. And it was joyous for Leavers and Remainers alike, who are sick of hearing our incredible country talked down by scared little government bods who talk about Britain like it's some helpless banana republic that can't look after itself. Well, swashbuckling Boris said balls to that. He insisted Britain can and will prosper. And he says we should tell the EU to stuff it if they demand a multi-million-pound divorce bill. And I agree with him, 100%. Boris helped deliver Brexit, but Mrs May cut him out of the most important challenge this country has faced in decades and left the exit process in the hands of a bunch of ineffectual ninnies who, when Barnier and co. say jump, say how high.
This is so amazing, Carole, that you have this wonderful faith in Boris.
In Britain.
Well, and in Britain. We all have faith in Britain. Look at this great Office of State. This great Office of State, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, broken up into the Department of Brexit, Department of International Trade, and the Foreign Office. And you've got these three Brexiteers, and their motto is all for one and none for all.
Exactly.
And it's all disintegrating in front of us. He has the goal to write this piece, 4,200 words, and implying that everything has been wrong with Britain, and on the one hand saying Britain is a great country and Britain's only going to be great if we leave the European Union. What is the reality? He brings up that £350 million figure again. Even Nigel Farage distanced himself from that. The head of the Statistics Authority immediately, unprompted, said, what is he doing bringing this up? This is misleading. The actual amount we give to the European Union is half that figure. It's about £8 billion a year net that we give. Do you know that's 1% of our annual government expenditure per year? 1% of annual government expenditure per year. I would pay that 1% for the peace that we've had over the last few decades in the European Union. And saving the National Health Service, a budget approaching £120 billion, it's not going to save the National Health Service. Now, here's the other thing. What really annoyed me about his piece was, forget the fact he was trying to scupper Theresa May, but it was implying, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, his sidekick, pipes up saying managing decline, manage decline. No one's talking manage decline. This country was the fifth largest economy in the world. This country is the best of the best in every area you can imagine. Well before Brexit, regardless of Brexit. And by the way, who's had the highest cumulative GDP growth rate of the original EU countries since the EU was formed? Not Germany at 35%, Britain at 62%. We've done really well out of it. And Boris, by the way, is whistling in the wind.
So I've let you talk there. You talked about GDP growth rate. The European Union's growth rate in the past 5-6 years has been 0.7%. That's not a very good record. The growth rate of the Commonwealth countries has been 5%, huge. They have a GDP of 10.5 trillion. Why are we scared to walk away from a failing monolith? And it is failing. A lot of the countries in the EU are verging on bankruptcy. Italy, Greece...
They're not at all. I've actually been in Portugal recently. I've been in Spain. They're bouncing back. Europe is growing faster than Britain at the moment since Brexit. That is the sad thing.
Well, you say that because the pound has been...
Not because of the pound. It's actually doing better. That's a fact.
I think, you know, a lot of our government ministers, people like Amber Rudd, people like Hammond, have been talking about the problems associated with Brexit. No one has been talking about the positives about leaving the European Union. And there are many, because we are not closing ourselves off from the world. We are opening our doors to the entire world.
We always were open to the world.
No, we were not.
There's another important point, if I may make.
We were not open to the world.
We say that on the one hand, if we leave the European Union, we can do all these trade deals. We can do all these trade deals. Just very quickly, if I may, very quickly. We can do all these trade deals. We already have 50% of our trade with the European Union. Even though it may be declining, we've got 50% of our trade. Through the European Union, we've got 17% with other countries. That's over 2/3 of our trade. And now Japan has done a free trade deal with EU. So over 70%. So over 70% of our trade. We're going to give that up to go for the rest.
And you think I talk a lot?
I may not have debating awards.
Our new panellists.
I may not have debating awards from Cambridge University, but I have got the under-11 breaststroke certificate for 25 yards. Let's just... You're redoing the Brexit debate. What Carole is talking about is Bravo Boris. That's the headline for this conversation. Now, I know you're going to be talking about, and I'm not dismissing what you say, so let's just focus more on Boris Johnson's intervention. And for me, as a businessman, and I'm going to ask you a question, but I only actually want you to answer it because I'm on a roll now. As a businessman, I would imagine you don't want to do deals on your knees. Exactly. And it seems to me that at the moment, Britain is doing a deal on it, or was attempting to do a deal, and it's not a good place to be. You mentioned Jacob Rees-Mogg. Let's just quickly have a listen to what he had to say about what Boris did.
At last, we're thinking about how we're going to prosper outside the European Union, rather than this poor little blighty approach that everything's so frightfully difficult. There's been too much Eeyore, and we want a bit more red rum. We should probably be given a knighthood for it, certainly not sacked.
The prime stallion that is Jacob Rees-Mogg. So let's focus on the Boris Johnson aspect. Has he achieved something by possibly just putting a bit of wind in the sails? We can have the Brexit debate, and I'm sure we shall. I would say that he probably has.
No, but what I would say is I'm totally in agreement with you there, Karen. If we're going to talk about Boris, the fact is Boris has completely been misleading people. And back to what you were saying about the Office of National Statistics, Sir David Norgrove is my new best friend, may I add. Love this guy. So straight away, unprompted, this is the letter he said. Dear Foreign Secretary, I'm surprised and disappointed that you have chosen to repeat the figure of £350 million per week in connection with the amount that might be available for extra public spending when we leave the European Union. It is a clear misuse of official statistics.
OK.
So again...
But nobody knows. Nobody knows that figure.
It's a fact. It's complete misuse.
The amount we would get back would be £200 million a week. And you know what?
Carole.
What I don't understand is why politicians are so keen to hand billions to Brussels, when if we kept that £200 million a week, we could give it to doctors, to nurses, to police.
That's not the issue. The issue is, why are you lying? Why is he lying? Why is he misleading
I don't
people?
know. Hang on, let's just say what he said.
Yes, exactly.
Or misleading
Hold on.
people.
And then we got
You cannot verify this figure.
No, and then he went back to Sir David and he said, broadly speaking, it is currently in the region of 300. We don't know what it will be.
That's the gross figure.
Because we might have to pay to stay members of the Atomic Agency, various agricultural agencies. So then we will know. So the broad figure.
But if it's as good as Boris is saying, then why not state the facts? Why not state the stuff that you definitely can verify?
Yes. And
let's get Michelle.
I don't know why they keep talking about this 350 million, and I wish that they wouldn't, because I think that it distracts from we're all sitting here debating whether or not that 350 million was right or wrong or somewhere in the middle, and I don't like that because I think that shouldn't be the focus. To your point, Carole, I do think it's nice to see some positivity around Brexit and what it could look like, because I am a believer, and I know you will disagree with me, but I am a believer that actually we've voted for Brexit and now it will happen. And actually, rather than putting so much energy into why it shouldn't, why aren't we coming together using brilliant brains like yours to focus on how amazing the future could be post-Brexit? And I think it's a real shame when so many people are using their intellect, their skills to fight to stay, instead of applying it to what could the future look like going forward.
So here's the reality of it. This decision that was made, and it's not about, Nick, rerunning the referendum. What happened a year ago, 23rd of June? In 4 months, the referendum was announced in February 2016. In 4 months, the British people had to get to know something that was 40 years. I'm still learning. I'm in the thick of it a year and a half later. They had to decide whether to leave or to stay. 52-40, it's very narrow voting to leave. Fine, it's a democratic decision to leave. However, here's the big difference. Here's the big difference. It was not leave on what basis. Nobody said leave with a blank sheet of paper. No. Can I just finish what I'm saying? You cannot just leave on any basis. Now, when the time comes, if you respect democracy, because any other election, if you vote somebody in by 50.001%, in 5 years' time, if they've lied to you or deceived you, like Boris has, or if they haven't performed, you throw them out. And you can here, this is our children, our grandchildren's future, and on what basis? So when the time comes, the British people and Parliament will have to have a say. Are you prepared to leave on this basis? Deal or no deal, are you prepared to leave?
You're a very successful businessman. Let's see what Sir James Dyson, who's also a very successful businessman, has to say.
Instead of being tied within Europe, we can now do trade agreements with countries all over the world. And by the way, the Commonwealth countries, who we discarded when we went into Europe, they're great trading nations to be tied with. And you know, if India, Australia, Canada, these are very, very wealthy and wonderful trading nations. I think we should just have a clean break. That's my view. A transition is a muddle. So you have to do transition arrangements and then another one. I mean, just have a clean break. It's not a big deal. The WTO tariff into Europe is 3 or 4%. We already pay it.
You see, this is a man who knows about business. He's saying it's no big deal. We can go to WTO rules and it will be fine. And what Boris, I just want to talk to you about what you said about Boris. You know, you might call him a liar and all the rest of it, and people say he's ambitious. Well, every politician.
He's a court jester.
No, he's not a court jester. He's much cleverer than that. That's actually been quite rude about a guy who I think a lot of the public like very much. And every poll that's done, he's the one who's going to come out as the next Prime Minister.
No,
so,
not at all. He's a laughing stock on the world stage.
Not at the moment.
But he's not laughing.
I hear this from world leaders.
I read something you wrote recently, and you said that...
What world leader has told you Boris Johnson is laughing?
Everyone says he is.
Give me a name.
No, but I just want to follow up this particular point, where you said, you were quoted as saying that the British people made a huge mistake in doing that, because Britain is now a laughing stock on a world stage. Well, if we are, one, I think that's a little bit condescending about the British people, but two, if we are a laughing stock, it's because of the people who are negotiating Brexit. They're weak, they're meek, anything the EU says that we have to do, we're saying yes. And that's why. And Boris is stepping in to say, actually, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to be tougher than that.
Enough of Brexit. So from one contentious subject to another. Paedophiles. There is no one among us who would not like to see them caught and their victims protected. The question of how is a matter for debate. So-called paedophile hunters have been a source of controversy, with the police often asking them to cease their activity. But recent figures showed that in 2016, evidence from these groups has been used in 44% of child grooming court cases. The police have finally conceded that they may need to start working with these groups, and I fully agree with them. To me, this is clear. Protecting children from sexual abuse must be paramount. The internet has allowed these vile paedophiles much easier access to victims at a time when police resources are stretched. It's time these groups are supported with training and are embraced as part of the fight to keep our children safe.
Michelle, child abuse is one of the most emotive subjects on the planet. There can't be a parent alive who wouldn't cheerfully kill someone who had interfered with their child. And you know, there's a part of me that says paedophiles are scum and they deserve everything that's coming to them. But there's another part of me that says that we can't allow vigilante groups to take over this. And I don't know whether you guys remember, but Nick, you certainly will, the News of the World Name and Shame campaign back in 2001. Yes. And that was after the death of Sarah Payne. Yeah. Every parent in the land was devastated by this. And so the News of the World published photographs of 100 paedophiles. And they published the addresses where they live, all the rest of it. So what happened was vigilante groups went to the homes of these people, only they got it wrong in some cases. They went to the house of one guy who was a paediatrician, and they didn't know the difference between the word. He got beaten up. They went to another guy's house who wore a neck brace, much like the one that one of these pedos was wearing in the photograph. They beat him up. one paedophile did hang himself as a result of the mob coming to his door. Now, people, I can hear parents at home saying, who cares if he hung himself? But what happens if we let the rule of law go in these cases? You can't control a vigilante mob. They don't ask for ID.
She's saying train them, though.
Yeah, so let me come back to your point. So I fundamentally, Shay, I disagree entirely with naming and shaming and putting people's addresses and pictures. That is absolutely wrong, and that would force people to go and beat these people up. That's all wrong, and that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm talking about, and in a moment I'll play you a clip from somebody that's doing this kind of work. There is so many people out there that are grooming children online. They've got so much easy access to this. Now, what I am talking about is responsible people helping the police force by helping them. In these chat rooms, they're pretending to be children, and then what they are doing is when it's suggested that they want to meet this child for sexual activity, those paedophile hunters are turning up to meet those children, calling the police in advance, alerting the police, and they are then, when the police arrive, they are then handing the person and the case over to the police.
But you know that's gone wrong already.
Yes, and that's what
shopping centre where they exposed a guy and then the public started to beat him up.
Yeah, so what I do not like, what some of these groups used to do, is video the encounter. Yeah. That is wrong. And video it and stream it, that's fundamentally wrong. So I don't want anyone being beat up in false cases. I want these groups to be trained, to be working with the police officers to understand what's right, what's wrong, what's the best way to do this, how don't you jeopardise, etc. And before I bring somebody else in, I just would like to... We've asked one of these prominent paedophile hunters, you know, what do they do and how they do it, and he's just responded in this way.
Or wait for them to arrange a meet, or turn up about an hour before, scout the area, contact the police, wait for the guy to turn up, do a confrontation video, and then they're arrested and hopefully sent down.
June?
Well, I agree with Carole on this one, because I totally understand what you're saying, but I don't know how you police this properly, because even if you do have these clear guidelines, what happens when people break those rules? And I just think once we go down that sort of mob mentality, that vigilante path, we're opening ourselves up for all manner of madness.
What happens next? Are we going to have undercover girls who pose as potential rape victims? Are we going to... It's a really... Now, this is born out of frustration.
No, I wouldn't advocate that, by the way.
No, but this is, you can see, let's try and trap all sorts of people committing all... This is born out of frustration in some instances, perhaps, by people sensing that the police don't go after them vigorously enough. And speaking in a week where it's been announced some police forces now aren't going to turn out for burglaries anymore, and we've already had stories, well-publicised stories, that they're only going to turn out if it's an odd number door or an even number door. I can't quite remember what it is. I think there's a question of resources. Actually, I don't even know that it would be able to do it, to provide the proper training. And one other thing, as someone who's been around newspaper stories for so many years, in some of these instances, you could risk prejudicing or destroying a case where the police are within inches of a major arrest. Somebody for mostly the right reasons. I, you know, hear the word confrontation, just a little warning light goes off. So and suddenly, a guy who was going to go down for a long, long time, you've blown the case.
So if I make, just to pick up on what you've said, a very important point. I think it is so bad that the way our police forces have been cut in this country. We've had a cut over 20,000. The neighbourhood policing that used to see 36,000 of them, they've been cut. I mean, that was a deterrent. They picked up information. They've gone. I mean, this is the most important thing of a government, is the security of its citizens, and we've been negligent there. So then if you look at it from that point of view, anything that these people are doing that can be seen to help the police, they need the help. But the danger is, you know, when is a citizen's arrest? When somebody is brave enough to actually tackle somebody on the street, that's bravery. They make a citizen, everyone applauds that. Here, if you actually catch a paedophile, no one's saying, don't report it, don't try and stop it. Of course people would say that. Vigilantism is a different thing altogether. And the other aspect that's really, really... Lord Bramall, what happened to him? When people are falsely accused, his wife died
he was before he
was proven to be innocent. I mean, that is so shocking when it goes wrong. So we've got to be very careful about this, but the police need every bit of help they can get.
Just to remind viewers, he was a former field marshal who was wrongly accused of being involved by that fantasist Nick, and his wife went to her grave never knowing that her husband had a child. Sorry, just let everybody know. Carole.
I forgot what I was going to say.
All right.
Yeah, so the internet is so vast, and even if we was putting more and more police officers into, you know, virtual chat rooms and all the rest of it, you would still struggle to stop and catch as many people as you ought to, and to keep as many children safe as we should. So I share your concerns. I don't want people... And the thing with the word vigilante, it makes people really uncomfortable because you associate it with violence.
Yeah, but listen,
these guys are not conducting violence.
Listen to what some of these groups are called. One of them is called the Hunted One. One of them is called Let's Go Hunting. It's LETs. Now, that sounds really sinister.
It's also further complicated. It's further complicated by the fact that a lot of what they're doing is not illegal. It's actually not illegal.
Well,
so that's what makes it even more difficult debate.
And I think there was a case back in April or something earlier on this year.
People falsify emails. I mean, I just think we open ourselves up to all sorts.
And even if you train them, you know, a policeman, it takes a long time to train them properly. You know, a member of the public is not going to have the mindset of a cop. He's not going to have the control of a policeman. So if he comes across a paedophile, he could lose it in a way that a policeman just would not.
But then what's the alternative then? So you try and stop these groups and you let these children...
Well, the alternative is what Karen is saying. We start investing in our police service more.
Sadly,
but you couldn't...
Which means in the age of terrorism, we need to anyway.
We have to. I mean, that's a must. I mean, armed police force. Again, with all the horrible attacks that are taking place. I mean, sadly, in Parliament, we had a policeman who was killed. There were no armed guards at the gate at that time.
But that's
now
not going to stop children being groomed online.
But I'm saying, generally speaking, we need more resource to be put in.
Has there been a tremendous spike? Because, sadly, I find it utterly incomprehensible. There will always be paedophiles out there, sadly. Unless there's been a tremendous spike in activity, I would argue that the laws we've got, should we be nicking more? Yes, of course we should. But we are getting them, and they are going before the courts, and now when they go before the courts, they get proper sentences. So, in a way, unless you can show that we've suddenly had an explosion and no one is doing anything about it, I don't know that we need to go down this path.
Well, this path is there, so this path is happening. It's been happening for a very long time, and they've tried to shut these groups down many, many times. And now what the police are saying is actually shutting them down is not working, so they're doing it anyway. So actually, how can we use these people? These people are obviously, you know, dare I say it, very good at what they do in terms of actually, you know,
but we don't need to legally be encouraging it. That's what you're saying here.
No, what I'm saying is, actually, there was the case that I described that shows that they're not doing anything illegal anyway. So what I would be saying is, listen, you can't be everywhere. The police force, even with all of the extra resource in the world, they cannot be everywhere all of the time. So if there are people that are safely, and I'm not advocating anyone battering anyone, I'm not advocating that.
No,
if you can safely do it.
I just don't
many
think it's
crimes
possible to
in every
police
area, many crimes are solved with the help of the public.
And
that's the balance. If the public can be helpful to the police, everyone will be for it.
Of course.
We stay with the online world because we got lucky last week, freakishly lucky. Notwithstanding those who were seriously injured, the Parsons Green bomb was poorly made, failed to fully detonate, and when it did start to burn, the London Underground train wasn't in the darkness of a tunnel, but above ground, at a station, and with the doors open. We can't count on a slice of luck as sizable as that again. Rather, we need action, and there's been precious little of that as regards technology giants showing responsibility about material available online. After the London Bridge terror attack, Theresa May told firms such as Google and YouTube, quotes, enough is enough. Since then, nothing. Until last night, when the Prime Minister said these rather bland and familiar words at the UN.
We must also step up our efforts as never before to tackle the terrorist use of the internet. The tech companies have made significant progress on this issue, but we need to go further and faster to reduce the time it takes to remove terrorist content online, and to increase significantly their efforts to stop it being uploaded in the first place. This is a major step in reclaiming the internet from those who would use it to do us harm.
Now, the German Parliament has already passed a law meaning social media companies could be fined €50 million if they don't remove offensive material, including instructions and propaganda. In Ireland, they have a digital monitoring organisation already set up. So, to employ your own words, Prime Minister, enough is enough. Let's get this sorted before we have to ride our luck again.
I completely agree with you, and it's a big source of frustration to me that these organisations, they've changed our society in the way that we live and communicate in such a broad way. But when it comes to taking responsibility and being accountable, they seem to be less keen to be forthcoming. There's a big conversation with these companies around, are they platforms or are they publishers? Now, these guys would argue, well, I'm a platform. I'm therefore not responsible for the content which sits within me. I would argue that actually you are bordering on publishing. You might not create that content, but you're hosting it and should have a responsibility for that. I would like to see these companies way more proactively stopping accounts. So I don't think it should just be the responsibility of a user to flag this as offensive content. I think they should be developing algorithms that stop this stuff going up in the first place. I wouldn't be going as far as like a country like China, for example, who censored various companies like Twitter, Facebook, Google. They just blocked them all. I wouldn't advocate going that far, but I think it is basic common sense that, for example, I think it was Channel 4 did some research into various things, and Amazon, when you was buying a particular chemical, it flagged up, its algorithm was flagging up saying customers that bought this also bought. And the list that they were showing was steel ball bearings, switches, cabling. Now, I'm sorry, but that is fundamentally wrong. There's only one reason you're buying that stuff, and you shouldn't be doing it.
And just to say, Amazon said as a result of that, all products must adhere to their selling guidelines and all UK laws. They also say they will work closely with police and law enforcement agencies should they need to assist investigations. Karan, let's talk a little bit about corporate responsibility. You're a hugely successful business, but obviously not in the area of Google or anything like this. These firms have a moral duty, don't they? Their staff are riding the tubes, their kids are riding the trains.
So this is where, when we say whose responsibility is this, this is the responsibility of both government and the companies involved. And the internet has, if you just think about it, it's barely not even 2 decades since the internet has existed, let alone Facebook is just over a decade old, and it's changed the world. And we're having trouble keeping up with it. And then you have these companies that are making enormous profits now. Earlier, you say, oh, internet companies never make a profit. Now these companies are making massive profits. Then they don't pay much taxes in certain countries, which is wrong. OK, they create employment. The government can have a role by regulating this in such a strong way that the fines are so strong, OK, you may not pay your taxes over here, you step out of line over here, we're going to fine you, and we're going to fine you big time because it's your responsibility to do this. WhatsApp turns around and says, and I love WhatsApp, I use it all the time, a lot of us use it, but it's encrypted. And WhatsApp say, we can't even access it for you if we want to because it's encrypted. I'm sorry. And these things that are going up online, there are 26,000 of them just over the past few months. They stay up for an average of 36 hours. And within 2 hours, it's spread around the world. And people are doing awful things as a result. So, sorry, it's not good enough. They've got to come down on it.
The industry you and I were in, if a newspaper published, if Sky News suddenly did a special on how to make a bomb.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
You know, when I was really disappointed with that speech from her, because she has said enough is enough many times before. And the words that she used were legislation. She said the government would consider bringing it. That's not good enough. When you consider that 3/4 of all Islamist-related offences are committed by people who have access material or instructions online, when you consider that more jihadi content is accessed in Britain than in any other country in the world, why are we faffing around? You know, and how can this government say it's doing everything it can to fight terrorism when its biggest aid is carrying on unchecked? You know, Google and Amazon, actually it was YouTube recently admitted that they profited from ads that ran alongside ISIS videos. Why aren't we clamping down on that?
Britain is one of the top 5 countries in the world where this is all
It's European capital.
Yeah, it was the European capital.
Well, I completely agree with you, Nick.
Wow, I've got a call. It's the first time ever. Karen, come more often.
I think that these companies have a moral duty, not just in terms of terrorist content, but trolling, fake news. They are publishers, whether they like it or not, and they're making money out of this content. Anyway, we always have to give a right to reply, so here's what the General Counsel for Google had to say. This is Kent Walker, and he said, machine learning has improved, but we are not all the way there yet. We need people and we need feedback from trusted government sources and from our users to identify and remove some of the most problematic content out there.
I love that.
I feel really strongly about that.
So that would mean if Sky News, it's down to the viewers to actually say, don't put bomb-making
I feel really strongly about that quote, and I think it is so bad. Yeah, he should be embarrassed about saying that, because basically what he's saying is their strategy is, we will publish everything, and then if you can flag us as something that's wrong, and we do it that way because, you know, we'd hate to make a mistake and actually accidentally block a thing. Outrageous. They should completely be going the other way. They should have algorithms, and this is not difficult. In fact, I would argue it's relatively easy.
They've got one for child abuse.
Yeah.
2013.
And they need they've got to be, as I said earlier, more proactive. And it's not just algorithms. They need to employ more people. And they can afford to employ the more people. Thousands more people.
Look how much these companies are worth. Google, I checked this morning, $400 billion. Facebook, $500 billion. Alphabet, YouTube is part of it, $670 billion.
They can afford to hire these people.
One of the bosses of those pays himself $150 million a year. He's just behind him. He should be just behind Karan.
If only.
He should be employing more staff.
The bottom line is that they created the problem. They have to solve it. It's their problem.
But back to what you were saying, Karen, this is up to government to be tough, and Theresa May is
she's whistling about.
There is an argument, though, about which government, because I very briefly read an article, and I think it was a case in France or something, where they was trying to levy a fine onto Twitter, but was struggling with the jurisdiction because Twitter didn't have offices there or employees there.
But this is where, unfortunately, as we're leaving the EU, we won't benefit from this. But this is where the EU actually can come together, and they are. They have been. They've been going after them in terms of unfair practices in search engines. So they have been.
Panel, I think I'm getting the hang of this.
Oh, good.
You're doing very well. It's great.
Stand by for my debate. Now, you might remember this Brexit slogan, let's take back control. Well, as far as I'm concerned, this was, and still is, nonsense, especially when it comes to immigration. Over the summer, when I gather Nick was reading up on his debating skills, new figures based on actual exit checks revealed that only 4,600 international students overstay their visas every year, not 100,000 as we've been led to believe for so long. We've also heard time and again that immigrants take low-skilled jobs. Again, the evidence contradicts this, with immigrants filling 1 in 5 skilled jobs in the UK. But above all, take back control perpetuated the myth that there's nothing we can do about immigration. Free movement means it's out of our hands. Well, wrong again. We already have the power to repatriate EU nationals after 3 months if they haven't found a job. And where did we get these powers? The EU. Britain doesn't and never did need to take back control. The Brexit emperor not only has no clothes, it doesn't make sense either.
Karen, how did you manage to read what I'd written?
I so wish I was coming back on camera, but anyway.
You know, I think the wonderful thing about having you on the show is you just state the facts.
He agrees with you.
No, you just state the facts. You know, you're not emotional about the argument. You're just stating the facts. This is the truth. And I think actually one of the things that we got wrong on the Remain campaign was we didn't factor in how passionate people were about immigration. And if we had, and we had focused on what you're talking about here, maybe we could have had a different outcome. Because actually, in terms of immigration, it is not what the Leave campaign made it out to be. And a lot of people were misled. And so, you know, thank you for stating the facts.
Thank you. This regulation...
Should we just go home?
Yes.
Thank you. We're off.
Please do.
This fact, this regulation in 2004, not just the other day, an EU regulation that allows any EU country to repatriate another EU national who has a free right to come in.
How many have we repatriated?
We've never used it. And other countries like Belgium repatriate thousands. They use it and we don't use it.
I read
but
Belgium
that's our own fault.
100 last year.
No. They've repatriated thousands in some years. But the fact is we can use it. That rule is there. And the impression is given that we have no control over immigration whatsoever.
Answer the question. How does repatriation...
And that's not just Labour governments.
Okay.
That's Tory governments as well.
How does repatriating people, i.e. deporting them, decide who can and can't come into this country? Because that's what people voted for in this referendum. And the thing you're talking about does not address the fundamental problem with free movement, and that's people. It encourages people, low skill, and semi-skilled workers to come into this country. Right. From much poorer countries to come into this country.
Okay, so here's the fact. 4.3% unemployment is the figure, the lowest in 4 decades. Now, that means that we need the 3 million people from the European Union. Without them, we'd have a labour shortage.
Well,
we'd have an acute labour shortage.
That we haven't prepared
the people who are
those are the unemployment figures.
Who are here are staying. They're not going anywhere. So where's the evidence that we will have a labour shortage if we stop
the unemployment figures? And we've got the highest level of employment in 4 decades, and we've got the lowest level of unemployment in 4 decades. What would we do? How would the public services? 130,000 people in the NHS and care sector from the EU.
This repatriation thing interests me. So what you're saying is someone who is here for 3 months and they're not working. What do? Do we go to their house, if they've got a family, we round them up, put them in the back of a truck and tell them to go? Because Britain doesn't operate like that.
No, but
we can't get rid of criminals, never mind.
I will answer, Michelle.
I find your point utterly bizarre.
Why?
Well, I shall tell you for why. So, are you quoting the Directive 2004/38/EU?
Yes.
So you want me to be grateful for this, call it a directive. So the EU have dictated to this country and beyond that actually there's free movement of people. So they've enforced this on us by
Hang on.
Okay, but we have to accept it to be part of the EU. And you want me to therefore then be thankful that they have then given me a loophole that if I want to, God only knows how to police that's almost a separate debate. But if I want to police this, that somehow they will allow me to send people back. What I want is you not to tell me that we've got this free movement of people in the first place.
Well,
you want me to be grateful for scraps of this. You don't want us to leave the EU
and
at all.
by the way, the free movement works both ways.
Yeah.
Do you know how much it benefits us to be able, from a business point of view, from a tourist point of view, from just travelling between the countries, how easy it is? It benefits us, it benefits our economies.
But you can't say that you can't say your opening statement was taking back control was nonsense, because actually controlling our own immigration system, defining our immigration system and controlling it, that's sovereignty, that's democratic, it's whatever you want to call it, but it's us creating our own rules. The EU dictating free movement and then giving us this loophole and then us being grateful is bizarre.
So the perception of the public is we have no control. People can just come in and stay
and
we can't, and they can't leave. The reality is we do have some control.
So why weren't the Remainers shouting about this directive from the roof? This is the answer to the immigration problem.
Because you can't enforce it. How are you going to
tell me? Tell me how you're going to enforce it.
Nobody seems to know about it. Whenever I brought this up, whenever I ask government, they don't know about it. Now, here's another thing.
How would you enforce it?
They have not answered, and here's the other thing. Do you know Tony Blair removed exit checks from our borders in 1998? Any other country, go to most European countries, almost everyone I travel to, South Africa, India, America, they check your passport when you leave the country. Here they've removed that, and that is a breach in security.
Please answer my question. How are you going to enforce that directive?
If you have control of your borders, which we've lost because we don't have those exit checks for a start, we need to have that.
That's not answering my question.
I wonder
no, Nick, he's not answering my question.
I am answering your
question. How are you going to do it? So these people that have come into the country that haven't got work after 3 months, how are you going to know who they are?
We should know who they are. If we have control over our borders, other European countries can do it. Why can't we? We don't have control over our borders at the moment in terms of those exit checks.
There is no
and that is negligent on behalf of our country, particularly when it comes from a security point of view. It's negligent to have those physical, visible exit checks.
I agree with you, but
I have to say, I don't think it... No,
you're not ignorant. Your answer. You're not ignorant.
Karen?
Yeah.
You're a nice fellow, and I like you. But you're talking a load of cobblers, or should that be cobras in your particular instance? Your debate is headlined, immigration is good for the country. Of course it is. Look at the last name, some of the last names of the panel.
Perfect.
There were 3 good examples. We wouldn't be here. So, of course it is. And to a sense, yes, the vote that went for the Brexit vote was about control of our country. And I do note, I think that Michelle's point has yet to be countered. But in my final summation, before I hand it back to you, and this is actually speaking more to your initial debate, but I can see, and you have every right, and I know that, June, you're passionate Remainers and you think we should go back. There was a key address, a State of the Union address last week by Jean-Claude Juncker, which I think would have changed the status quo as regards Britain's relationship with the European Union. Here's just some of the things. We need one president. We need one finance minister. We need an army by 2025. We need to expand the Schengen zone through the Balkans. If you're in the EU, you are taking the euro. End of. If you're in the EU, you are in the Schengen zone. End of. I put it to you, Karen. That sort of thing. It was always going to come. A pressure point, the status quo.
So
not of excess.
So let me...
No, but you'd have had no opt-out.
June, just to build on what you said, for a start, I mean, Jean-Claude Juncker, a lot of people don't like him. He happens to be at the moment the head. By the way, he doesn't speak for the whole of the European Union, and we have always we've always had the best of both worlds. In fact, we have. Yes, we do.
No, but in the future.
Firstly, in the future we do. We have made it very clear we're not into further integration. Yeah. We are not in the euro, thank God. Yeah. We're not in the Schengen zone.
He has said no exceptions.
We drive on the left-hand side of the road. I pour my beer in pints if I want to. We have the best of both worlds. All this talk, we're not going to join any EU army. This is nonsense.
I remember when there would be no EU army, and now they've finally been flushed out.
And Turkey's going to join the EU. That was another thing that was... That was another frightening...
Still not answered, Michelle.
Turkey's not going to join the EU.
The last from Hull has got you.
You can't answer my question, and that's why you're avoiding it.
I've answered your question.
No, you haven't. You've talked about exit checks, and I agree with you. We should have exit checks. Brilliant.
Yes.
You haven't answered my question about this directive that you like, that everyone should be aware of. How are you going to know that whoever from the European Union doesn't have a job?
Are they claiming benefits or not?
If other European countries have been able to use this directive and deport people who do not have the means to look after themselves in this country, that doesn't mean we can't. We can't do that. And the main thing is we do have controls, but we need to reintroduce exit checks.
I'm going to have to end your debate there. Fantastic point made, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited. Anyway, darlings, it's my debate next, and I'm sorry, James, but this just isn't good enough. Hollywood is blessed with a vast array of talented, witty actors. So when it comes to the question of who to invite to the Emmys, they aren't really short of options. However, on this occasion, they opted to invite an actual joke instead of a comedian. Sean Spicer, former press secretary to the Trump White House, who has become famous for his gaffes and barefaced lies. Sorry. Alternative facts. Can't believe it. They actually rolled this man out, literally.
This will be the largest audience to witness an Emmys, period. Both in person and around the world.
No, not funny. Airtime and attention is oxygen to the likes of Spicer and his former boss. So media, all please take heed. If only Trump had stayed on The Apprentice firing contestants instead of threatening to fire rockets. Don't make the same mistake with Spicer. As the LA lovies have repeatedly spoken out against Trump, I'm getting a familiar fragrance. Is that hypocrisy you're wearing tonight, Mr. Hollywood? If Spicer really wants to go from a puppet on a podium to a performer on the stage or screen, then he can bloody well audition like all the other wannabes. Or get a reality TV show.
June, for such a stylish and all-round decent person, you can be po-faced at times, can't you?
How did I know you were going to say that?
It was a gag.
No.
Fortunately, we live in a world where we can poke fun at almost anything. The producers, Adolf Hitler, The Interview, the movie about Kim Jong-un. Are you really saying that we can't do a gag about Sean Spicer and President Trump because of your visceral dislike of the president, for which you are totally entitled? You are now seeking to censor views, to censor gags, not to allow them to do some comic stunt because you don't like President Trump. That is not a path down which someone as bright as you should be treading.
Well, I'm not saying we should censor. What I'm saying is
that
Hollywood... No. What I'm saying is Hollywood needs to have a little bit more responsibility. That's how we've ended up that with Trump in the first place?
They can make movies about Kim Jong-un. They can make movies about Hitler.
He can't become president, fortunately.
But they could, no, but these are vast historical figures, one of whom did lead the world to brink of a war, to a war, and the other one might. But we can have gags about them, but we can't do a gag about a former spokesman for President Trump.
Well, Hollywood makes its own gags by announcing the wrong winner in the Oscars. It doesn't need Sean Spicer.
I think what this actually proves, isn't it, that in Hollywood there's an indistinguishable line between fame and infamy.
Yes.
And what it means is the audience don't care how you get it, what you've done,
as you get it.
good or bad, well, as long as you get it. And I suppose the hypocrisy thing for me is, you know, the Hollywood lovies are always on the side of the ordinary Joe in America. They're always sticking up for his cause, whatever, on their side. And here we are. This is a man who lied to millions of ordinary Joes up on that podium, taxpayers, and they're letting him validate himself on that stage. They're glorifying him. Now, you know, and what this means for Spicer in real life, this means now...
She's great.
What this means for Spicer in real life, he'll be able to
You've been drinking one of his beers during half-time.
I wish he hadn't
What's happened here?
He didn't bring any. But what this means is he'll be able to charge more for speaking engagements. His job will be higher paid than it was. And he's now
He'll get a pundit job.
Not that.
You know what is really surprising about this is, here's somebody who was an absolute failure at what he did.
Yes,
he misled people.
Being
I mean,
celebrated.
to mislead people in such a blatant way with the inauguration saying the biggest ever, and there you see a side-by-side shot of one is half empty and one is absolutely full. I mean, no, this is the post-truth world we live in, by the way. And then he becomes a celebrity. The same thing is happening over here. Nick Timothy, disgraced sidekick of the Prime Minister. Now he becomes this big sage and this big guru of what should and shouldn't happen with Brexit. It's nonsense.
It's nonsense.
Let's get Michelle.
Well, all I can say is I can't... every time I think of Sean Spicer, I think of this.
Now, I'd like to begin today by apologizing on behalf of you to me for how you have treated me these last 2 weeks. And that apology is not accepted. Because I'm not here to be your buddy. I'm here to swallow gum, and I'm here to take
See, that just cracks me up. And I did notice that she was in the audience looking slightly uncomfortable when he wheeled himself out there, didn't she?
They could have done that again. We didn't need the real thing.
As long as it's always anti-Trump, as long as it's always then it's OK.
Well,
but the minute that it might be seen
to... decide what you are.
And Karen, these people shouldn't ever be allowed to write articles for magazines.
He should be a national pariah.
Of course, it's a free world, there's free speech, they can... But it's the way that they're treated as celebrities. And I think people are intelligent in judging them. That's why I think I draw the analogy here with Nick Timothy now, who suddenly got this stage. And people should realise just a few months ago what he was like and what he did.
It's fascinating to get into his mindset and see what he thinks about where Mrs May finds herself. He was the one who helped steer her towards that disastrous decision to call an election.
But there are ways you can do that.
If the editor of the Telegraph wants to run his columns, let him, or if it's a her, let them do it.
It's that they get the celebrity status from actually being failures.
Why are you so against what's the problem?
But Spicer should not have been allowed to make a joke out of what he did.
Exactly.
He shouldn't.
He shouldn't.
And he was glorified. And there were
the joke fell flat, by the way.
But all the Hollywood celebs who had been slamming him and Trump,
then
suddenly
trying to get selfies with him.
They're drinking with him.
Yeah.
You know, that's the hypocrisy, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I just still can't get over the fact that he didn't answer my question.
I've answered your question many times.
It's a very serious world you would have us live in, isn't it?
No, it's a fun world. And,
well, it's not fun. Because if the
one
joke,
where you choose sides.
As for you, what's happened to you? You're chuckling the left side there. You can the one person I thought I could write, Judy's always
She's
still muttering about her unanswered questions.
It's actually the hypocrisy of the Hollywood lovies that gets on my nerves. Not so much Spicer, it's them. It's that 1 minute they're standing up on podiums at award ceremonies everywhere, having a go at Trump, having a go at him. The next minute, they're chinking glasses with him.
And taking
Don't
selfies.
do it.
In fact, let's look at James Corden's picture again.
And, look at that.
And then, obviously, as soon as this picture came out, Twitter went mad over it. And so he likened it to having too many drinks and then waking up the next morning and sort of being slightly embarrassed.
He's really regretted
it. He made a feature on his show, didn't he? He said, he made out that he was a Hollywood phony just before everyone else said it. He actually did it on the show the next day. But, that is disgusting.
That's disgusting. Sorry.
What? Sorry, why James Corden having a gentle embrace with Sean is, quotes, disgusting?
Well, you can't have it both ways. It would be like me trying to kiss up to Trump after everything I've said about him.
Exactly. That's a good analogy.
Be honest.
That's a good analogy. She meets Trump and then gives him a kiss and
Can
says,
you
nice
imagine?
to meet you. Yeah.
But they're just having a drink and there's an after-show...
Hypocrisy.
And he's a liar. That's what he was. He lied to the American people over something, you know. I mean, what he lied about wasn't that important, frankly, but it doesn't matter. It's just that it's the Hollywood hypocrisy. They slate him at one hand, then the next time he's at the party, they go, oh, hi, Sean, nice to see you, have a glass of champagne.
The next time they'll take his successor who lasted for 2 days.
Yeah. Well, they've already been doing that, Scaramucci.
There's no end to it.
Well, there's no shortage of people, of course, who've only lasted a short time in the White House. They seem to be coming along at a fairly regular rate, so who knows who'll be there next time. And talking of time now for this week's Straight Talker. Should it be Vince Cable for comparing Brexit to a public school pillow fight? Should it be Michael O'Leary for at least admitting Ryanair messed up over the pilot rotas? No, in pure straight-talking terms, there can only be one winner. Oh, June. 2 weeks ago, I said the UN needed to be more than an exalted talking shop if it's going to deal with the North Korean crisis. Well, this is what the US President Donald Trump said in his first speech to the UN this week.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
So, for that, Donald Trump, you are this week's Straight Talker. Hate him or tolerate him, you can't really argue with that point, can you?
Yeah,
June.
you can.
Karen, let me just explain while June tries to get to the power of speech. You don't necessarily have to subscribe to what the Straight Talker says to applaud what he or she did. And all I'm saying is that year and year and year of jaw with Kim Jong-un has got us absolutely nowhere. He spoke in a straight fashion. That's... She got oxygen yet? That's what I'm saying, Karen.
But he's not going to do anything. He said that 3 times before already. He's not going to do it. And Kim Jong-un knows that he's not going to do it.
That is not statesman-like.
But it is. But it is straight.
But it's not
And also, he only
behaviour.
said that because he can't say Kim Jong-un's name. So he called him Rocket Man. They can't pronounce it. So that's what that's about. I mean, help us.
Michelle?
Well, it is straight, like, to your point, the definition of that award is he says what he means, he doesn't mess around, agree or disagree. It's very straight talking. I'm not sure it'll have much effect.
It doesn't mean it. He can't do it. He won't do it.
Well, that's it for this week. Our rotas mean we have to go. But before we do, Karen, after that performance, I think I can say you're fully deserving of those debating awards. Congratulations and good night.